here. We also have right now 20 people joining us by Zoom, which is a good thing this evening. My name is Jack Candon. I'm going to be moderating this evening. I'd like to thank Annette Brown and the Women's Club for putting this together. Also, Anna Adachi-Mejia for working the Zoom connection for us. The format this evening, we have 5 candidates. For the 3-year seat, we have 2, Marcia Calloway and Rob Gere. Pam Smith is running for the 2-year seat, and Aaron Lamperti and Priscilla Vincent are running for the 1-year seat. All are here this evening and all are ready to answer your questions. The format is this: opening in alphabetical order, 3 minutes for each candidate. I'll then ask a question of all candidates and they'll respond with a 2-minute time frame each. And then we'll open up questioning to people here as well as people on Zoom. We would ask, if possible, for you to come down to the microphone to ask your question, if that's possible. If it's not possible or practical for you, let me know, and we'll try to get the microphone to you. After the questioning at about 8:15, we will try to wrap up questions from the audience and allow closing questions in reverse order. So those who had gone first will go last, and those who had gone last will go first. During the evening, I would ask, there are probably people here who have more than one question. I would ask if you would please let others ask questions as well, and so we give everybody an opportunity. The time frame is remarkably tight. During the questioning, you'll notice that Annette is going to be holding up 2 cards. One is a 30-second notice, and the other is a please stop. I really don't want to ask Annette to use those to question askers. So please keep your questions short, to the point. With that, during the question, because we have the people here participating by Zoom, during the questioning, there may be hands up here, but we're going to take a break, and Anna is going to put one of the people on who is joining by Zoom, and we'll take a question that way. So I hope that works for people. It's trying to get everybody involved. With that, let's get started. Opening statements, 3 minutes each. The sequence is going to be Marcia, Rob, Aaron, Pam, and Priscilla. Marcia.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Marcia Calloway.
You might need to speak up, Marcia.
I'll do my best. Can you hear me? No, sort of? Okay. My name is Marcia Calloway. I have lived in Norwich since 1997. I've lived in Vermont for most of my life. My family came here in the 1700s. Vermont is home, and I love it, and I love Norwich. Can you, a little louder? Okay. My husband and I raised our family here, and we both worked at Dartmouth. I worked there for almost 25 years, and he still works there. And when I retired, I thought it would be a good idea to contribute to my community and run for the select board. So I did. And for the last 2 years, I've done that, and it's been quite an educational experience. I had been following what was going on in town for a few years, but I think over the last 2 years, I've learned a lot. And I think the thing that I've liked the most is that, my background is in law, and I really enjoy solving problems. So I like to figure out what's going on, what needs to be fixed, what people are worried about, and do some investigation to see if there are some solutions. It's been a tumultuous time, as I don't have to tell all of you, in Norwich for the past few years. Just in my 2 years, we've had 3 town managers. So things have been a little topsy-turvy. I think we've been working hard to try and right the ship, but I think we have a lot more work to do. And I think that 3 more years would be a nice, challenging experience. I think there are lots of things that we can do to maybe be more efficient with how we spend our money. perhaps start to look at our place in this geographical area to see how we fit in with the other communities and what kind of economies of scale we can work out. Because I think if we start being a little more collaborative, we might find that we save some money. But in any event, one of the best things of being on the select board has been that I've got to meet a lot of people. When my kids were in school, one of their friends said, "Is your mother dead?" Because I never appeared at the school. I was always working. And it's been a lot of fun to meet people in town, and I'm looking forward to enjoying those relationships, to hearing your questions tonight. And I'll continue to serve you as best I can if I'm elected for another 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. Rob.
My name is Robert Gere. I moved to Norwich December 31st, 1975. I remember it very well because it was the New Year's Eve for the bicentennial. My wife and I bought a house here in 1978, and we've lived in that same house ever since then. It was somewhat proud of the fact that it was the second cheapest habitable domicile in Norwich. And who knows, it may still be, I'm not quite sure. The past 3 years, as Marcia said, have been tumultuous. The changes in personnel, as a comment, when I was elected in 2020, 3 weeks later, we were remote and did not have in-person meetings again until this January. So it was a very different experience, I think, for me than many other select board members previously. I've enjoyed the last 3 years helping where I can. I feel a responsibility to be of service to the town. I have been on committees, various committees in different positions since the late 90s. I would like to continue on the select board for another 3 years. We have some major issues coming up, and the one I'm most concerned about is the damage that people are trying to do to the town manager form of government. And I'm concerned that that's wrapped up in all the other issues that we have going on right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Aaron.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Lamperti. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to the Women's Club for arranging this. As you may know, I was appointed to fill 6 months of Claudette Brochu's, I think, 3-year term in August, and I'm now running for the last year of her term. This wasn't something I was particularly looking to do, but now that I've kind of got my head in the game and I've kind of figured out how the select board works and know a little more about town government, I think I'm ready to do a little more. I think 6 months has been fun, and I think I have something to contribute for another year. My history with the town government. After I left my job at the Montshire, 20 years doing exhibits work there, I started working with the Norwich Energy Committee for a few years. I was chair for a year or so. Jack Cushman and I then spent a year working on the Article 36, which is the article that I believe John Langus put forward, to which that was overwhelmingly approved by the town, to advise the town to eliminate fossil fuel use from town operations. So we put together a report on how to best go about that. And then shortly after that was when I was appointed. Oh, I'm sorry. Sure. So if I have an agenda, as a candidate, it would be climate change. I think it's kind of a moment now when I've read someone say a moment when we've kind of moved as a nation from denial to dysfunction. And this is a big step, actually. So probably most of the people in this room would agree, maybe some grudgingly, that that climate change is a real issue and that it is changing and that it's created by us. The next step is to move to action, and that's where I think we are at, and I think that's where the town is at, and Article 36 is an example of that. So I see that as something for me to carry forward with. My approach to the select board, I believe, is to kind of a calm, constructive, very much collaborative approach. I think that we should hire good staff and we should support them and let them get on with their work. And that the job of the select board is mostly to do that. Yeah, so I think that's about it. I'd love your support and thank you for being here and thank you for voting.
Thank you, Aaron. Pam.
Thanks, Rob. Hi, I'm Pam Smith. Some of you probably know me from running for this position for the last 2 years. So this is my third time of doing a candidate forum. Some of you might know me as a lister or as a trustee of public funds or in my role as the assistant treasurer. I moved to Norwich in 1982. My daughter went through the Norwich and Hanover school system, graduating in 95. And my husband and I moved away for a few years and we moved back to Norwich 8 years ago. I have over 35 years of accounting experience. I'd like to bring that experience to the budgeting process. You know, I have experience in forecasting, capital planning, budgeting, cash flow. And I think these are all skills that I can put to use in helping the town with the budgeting process. My husband and I started a mail order business on our dining room table. We grew it to $5 million in sales with about 30 employees. And that's right where Norwich is today. We have a $5 million municipal budget and about 30 employees. I have attended just about every select board meeting. I've attended a lot of committee meetings, and I think I will be able to get up to speed rather quickly in all the issues that the select board will be dealing with over the next 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Priscilla.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Is this mic close? Get this mic up here. Yeah. Thank you for coming. Thanks to the Women's Club and thank you to all the Zoomers. What am I doing here? Huh? Sitting in front of you asking for your vote. It's because of my daughter. She came home after Christmas, heard me talking about the select board all the time and said, Mom, you got to run. No, I don't do politics. But I didn't see anybody else volunteering at that point. So here I am. I didn't pay attention to the select board for my first 31 years in town. And I began to pay attention about 6 months ago. And I was rather dismayed by what I saw. So I feel a little bit like the skunk at the garden party here. But I saw a select board that had too many votes that were 4-1. There's nothing inherently wrong with 4-1 votes, might mean a harmonious select board, but it was always the same 4 and the same 1. That's not good. I was not very pleased with the way the public was being treated. I thought that some of the elected officials, other elected officials who are supposed to be co-equal, were disrespected. And it seemed, as I started paying attention, that a lot of issues were being kicked down the road. And some of these are costing us money. For instance, the elected listers brought a request for proposal for the townwide reappraisal in July before the select board. Nothing was done until we were crunching up against the deadline in December. It ended up being the same firm, the same proposal, $25,000 more because we delayed. That's your tax dollars at work. I think it's known that there's a lawsuit against the town because of violations for the open meeting law. I'd have no idea where that is, how much has been spent. You don't talk about pending litigation, but that's unfortunate. Our town finance office is a mess. At one point this fall, we were told we had a surplus, then it was a deficit. Hey, what is it? I don't know. It's kind of hard to run a town when that's not doing well. There was a recent accounts payable warrant covering about a month, the end of December through the end of January. We were paying a temporary town finance person $12,000 in 1 month. If you do the math, that's about $144,000 a year. And that's a lot more than we're planning to pay a permanent finance director when we get one. Without consulting the school board, the select board decided to put on the ballot a warrant article that would change the date that when we pay our first payment of taxes. It turns out this could present serious cash flow problems for the schools, which might require, who knows, a short-term bridge loan. That's expensive. But the school board wasn't consulted in advance. There's another article on there they put on that you're not supposed to. Goodbye.
Ah,
I have not begun to fight.
thank you, Priscilla. I will point out that we right now have 79 people joining us by Zoom. And I would ask those who are participating by Zoom, if you have a question, please raise your hand and Anna will direct the question when we can. For those here who would like to ask a question, again, please come to the microphone if possible and identify yourself and your question. And if you would like to direct it to a specific candidate, please identify that, or if to all, please indicate so. Please direct them to me and I will refer them. Okay, I get to ask the first question. Here it is. You each have 2 minutes to answer. There seems to be an increased level. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. There seems to be an increased level of frustration, if not acrimony, about the actions of the select board members in a town manager form of governance, the town's inability to retain employees, and the select board providing a real opportunity to consider and involve citizen input. Is that perception real? Is it warranted? If so, what is the role of the select board in fixing the problem? I'd like to ask this to be answered in the following order: Pam, Aaron, Priscilla, Marcia, and Rob. Pam,
Okay, where to start?
2 minutes.
Where to start? It is the job of the select board to oversee all of these things that Jack has just mentioned. And we do it through the town manager. And as Marcia noted, we've had 3 town managers in the last 2 years. So that kind of upheaval, makes it difficult to keep the town running smoothly. But it is the job of the select board to oversee that town manager, whoever it may be. And the town manager's job is to oversee all of the employees in our different departments. I think one of the biggest problems that we've seen on the select board side is the tone. The listers, of which I am one, met with Mary Layton from the select board to talk about some of the problems that exist. And the topic was supposed to be, how do the elected officials interact with the staff? That's not what we ended up talking about. What we ended up talking about was how the elected officials feel disrespected by the select board, and that the tone needs to be set at the top. So if the select board is being disrespectful of other elected officials, what is that saying to the employees of the town? What is that saying to the town manager, to the finance director, to the DPW director, to any of the employees in town? What does it say? It says, you don't have to be disrespectful of those people. And so it really does come down to the select board setting the tone of how we interact with each other. If we're not collaborative, if we're not respectful, then that's where the problems come.
Thank you, Pam. Aaron?
I got two. So you asked, is it real and is it warranted? And I think it's clearly real. There is frustration and people are speaking up about it. I have to say that in my 6 months, I think I came in at kind of maybe a little bit of a peak of frustration. And I think since then, my sense is that the board has been working hard to try to communicate better, and I think the tone has changed with a different chair. And I think that my sense is that the frustration is less. My sense of why it was happening has mostly to do with COVID and isolation and Zoom and a whole host of circumstances. The same with much of the question of how many employees were leaving, and I mean, we had nationally had a great resignation. Nationally, we have a huge, how do you want to put it, divide in our conversation that is not polite and is not a civil. And I think that's a little bit reflected in Norwich, not in terms of necessarily the politics, but just in terms of the level of frustration was the word you used. So really, to me, I think we need to be back in person for meetings as much as possible. We need to remind ourselves that we're neighbors, and we need to be civil. And I think that's just simply an ongoing job that's always going to be with us and that we need to commit to.
Thank you, Aaron. Priscilla.
I am so in accord with everything that Aaron just said. And I'm not going to waste everybody's time by repeating it, but thank you, Aaron. I think that was great. And there has been a change in the tone in the select board with the change of leadership, and that's great. It's unfortunate that we had apparently a fairly toxic management situation. I don't think it was the town. I think it was the management. Things are getting better. COVID made a lot of things harder. It's much better. The interactions are much better now that we can meet in person. And my big thing is every single select board meeting should be hybrid, which it isn't yet. I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Marcia.
I think that the level of frustration is absolutely real, and it was a level of frustration in the community and in Tracy Hall. I think that I strongly believe in looking at the statutes, and it's basically says that the select board is responsible for everything that isn't given to the care of another individual by statute or another employee or official. And our only employee is the town manager, but we have an obligation of oversight for that town manager, and for cause, we can replace that person. The cause is a big bucket. I mean, who knows what it is, and there's no definition of it in the law. But basically, I think what we need is a better structure. Our personnel policies are woefully out of date. The job descriptions need to be looked at afresh. I think that everybody from the town manager down needs to understand what their role is, and that the personnel policies apply to all of them. And that the select board role is going to be to make sure that the manager is managing according to all of those policies. And basically, I think that with that sort of regulation, so that people know, if I have a problem, this is my path. I'm not stuck, and I can do something to make the situation better. And I think everybody will be feeling that they have enough information and less frustrated.
Thank you, Marcia. Rob.
So I'm going to be somewhat apologetic. I think the level of frustration was real, and people had questions that weren't getting answered. But I will also try and throw an excuse out, which is the board was faced over that period of time with a lot of issues that involved legal issues and questions of personnel relations, things that either we were being told not to discuss, or things that just seemed unethical to discuss in public. The greatest problem I think we had was that none of us could come up with an idea of how to communicate what was allowed to be communicated. And as a result, we just shut up. And so there wasn't responses to questions which were fairly useful. And it was just continuously a frustration, but without unanimity or a majority vote of the board, we couldn't come with any kind of a statement. We couldn't fill you in unless we had discussed it. We couldn't discuss it unless we were in public session or as a part of the executive sessions that we had. And as a result, we didn't communicate clearly at all. And for that, I apologize. And I hope that we can go forward with conscious attempts to make sure the communication lines are open. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. There was a question, a gentleman, third row.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the Women's Club. I'm Jack Cushman. I'm a resident of Norwich, and many of you know and have worked with me. Jack Cushman. And I would like each of you to address with as much specificity as possible the urgent question of climate change. How would you, as a select board, build a consensus that would allow us to accomplish the almost universally recognized need to decarbonize our lives? I would like you to address the sources of emissions that are under the select board's control. That is our direct municipal emissions of climate change. I would like you to address your objectives for Tracy Hall, the largest single point source of carbon emissions, of our vehicle fleet, equipment and vehicle fleet, a very complex question. And I would also like to ask you whether you would support what I understand is a question on the Dresden ballot, which would commit the Dresden School District, including our Marion Cross School, to a decarbonization plan so that the school also participates in this. Please be as specific as you can about what your plans are for the select board in addressing the urgent imperative to control our combustion of fossil fuels.
Thank you, sir. In this order, please. Priscilla, Marcia, Rob, Pam, and Aaron. Priscilla.
I think people could spend weeks debating that question, and I just don't have any expertise in that field at all. I will say that, yes, Tracy Hall urgently needs work anyway, because it's being falling into disrepair. And we also have to consider the tax burden on people. It's important to do the right thing, but people have to be able to afford to live here, and our taxes are already going up enormously.
Thank you. Marcia.
So basically, I think that the board needs to have some help. And we had talked about developing not a commission, I can't remember what we called it, but we need a group of people to help us evaluate things, because if you're watching the select board meetings, you're watching us try and, hit the high notes on the different issues, and we need good information. I personally don't appreciate it when someone walks in, a town manager or whomever, and says, you should do this. I want to know what the options are, because there are going to be costs, there are going to be various levels of efficiency, and I think we need help doing that. So if it were up to me, I would immediately implement that kind of a group of people who could actually help us. I would like to see us focus on the ARPA funds as soon as possible and involve the community in that, because I think if there's buy-in, it's a very small amount of money, really, just a little over $1 million, but it's $1 million. And if we involve the community and we lay out these different projects, I think that will be a way of having people buy in. We've got a study that we're waiting for and have been waiting for from something called Living Buildings about Tracy Hall. That hasn't been forthcoming. It would be nice to have, I'd love to have more community involvement so that people were helping us with that. The vehicle fleet is tough because a lot of the things that we need to have done by the DPW vehicles aren't well done, I'm told, by vehicles that are not gas powered. So that's a problem for us. And yes, I would be supportive of a plan for decarbonizing the school. So the message is we need help, and if it's up to me, the board will be asking for it.
Thank you, Marcia. Rob?
So the Article 36 task force came up with some ideas that have yet to be implemented. Amongst them are, as Marcia mentioned, having people who are helping out, in particular by watching expenditures of fossil fuels and making sure that we're using vehicles efficiently that are consuming fossil fuels and getting rid of carbon greenhouse gases. The Tracy Hall issue is one that I have to hit myself periodically to say, no, don't say we told you so. When we had a plan to turn Tracy Hall into a zero carbon emitting building, it was voted yes and then voted down. Unknown reason, could have been pandemic, whatever. But it's an issue that has to be addressed, and as it has been suggested, it may involve major changes to the town hall and Tracy Hall, either replacing or doing major renovations to make it a usable, healthy building to work in. That all costs money, and an aspect of the climate problem that I'm aware of is that some of the solutions are expensive, some are less efficient than they might be in 2 or 3 years, but it's an existential problem. And we're going to pay for it, whether it's in taxes or personal expenses. We'll be paying for it forever going forward.
Thank you, Rob. Aaron?
Oh, that was last.
I think we have everybody.
No, I haven't.
Oh, I'm sorry, Pam. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Check with my memory.
Okay. If I can remember all of the things that Jack asked for. One of the things that I've been very frustrated by is that the Article 36 task force turned in their report to the select board on February 23rd of 2022, almost a year ago tonight. And there were a lot of good recommendations in that report. None of them have been implemented. And if I were a member of that task force, I'd be very frustrated that I spent all that time working on these things to be ignored. One of them was a green procurement team. And I think that's kind of what Marcia was getting at, that we need a team of people who will look at the things that we can do now and plan for the things that we can do in the future. One of the suggestions I've been making for the last several years is, instead of going out and buying 3 new trucks for the DPW that are all fossil fuel vehicles, why aren't we buying used to buy a few years of time? And then, maybe in that amount of time, some more efficient vehicles will come along, whether it be hybrid or all electric vehicles that can be used to run the DPW. Same thing with the fire department. Same thing with the police department. I know that there was a request for an all-electric vehicle for the police department about 3 years ago, and the select board said no. So there are a lot of things that we can do. Tracy Hall, the geothermal was voted down because it was too expensive for what we got for our money, and it was a single bid contract. So those are a lot of questions that are going to have to come up before the select board, and they need to be solved rather quickly. Thank you.
Now, Aaron.
This is the big question for me. as the vice chair of the Article 36 task force, I believe we went through this process and made some recommendations. And yes, absolutely, we should act on those as best we can. The reality is that without a town manager and without half the staff at the DPW for some last year and all of that, it has been difficult to do anything but try to catch up. But I believe we are caught up, and I believe that this is going to be one of the big tasks of the next board. That is one of the reasons I chose to run for the additional year, was to be on this board and do this very thing. Tracy Hall is the big one right away, as it was 3 years ago when we passed whatever Article 8 or 9 or whatever it was at the time. I believe this is perfectly solvable problem. As a matter of fact, another way to look at this. So I said before that we've moved from denial to dysfunction, which I think the answers to this question have clearly represented that everyone agrees now, but we still haven't done anything. And it's just simply time to do all the things that we can. And transportation is very difficult. Jack knows this very well, but there are, every month, there are new options, and there are many good options coming right along, and we simply need to commit. Also, another thing that is, there is a huge pile of money coming, and we have to get ourselves ready to actually take advantage of that money and be ready when one of the things that this board, the current board, chose to do was add capacity in the town manager's office to write and track grants. And one of the big reasons for that is exactly this.
Thank you, Aaron. Question from the audience, please raise your hand and let me know. Yes, sir. Oh, Demo, come on down.
Thank you for putting this on, and,
Demo, I think you're going to need to get closer to the microphone so people can hear you.
okay. Can everybody hear me all right? Okay,
No, actually.
all right. Demos Sophronis, Norwich. In September of 2021, the Norwich Town Manager authorized a new community service officer position. The community service officer position was funded by the town, and Officer Alex Root was hired. This was a fully approved, fully funded, and filled position. Alex left the position to become a police officer in Rutland in July of 2022. The position stayed vacant again, and when our new police chief, Wade Cochran, brought it to the attention of the select board during one of the meetings in an effort to hire someone to fill it, he was told it was never authorized by the select board, and therefore the vacancy does not exist, and the position was defunded. My question to the candidates, and Jack, you assigned the order, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. My question to the candidates is, if elected, will you support funding this position again, as it was a legal hire to begin with, authorized by the town manager under a town manager form of government? And this doesn't have anything to do with the Article 11 warrant. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Demo. Do you have the question, everybody? In this order, please, and I will try to follow it. In this order: Pam, Aaron, Priscilla, Marcia, and Rob. So, Pam.
I don't know that we have the funding for this position. It was not put in the FY '24 budget, which starts July 1 of 2023. So if it were to be funded, the select board would have to figure out where those funds would come from. And maybe that's something that comes out of the ARPA funds, or some other place. I don't know. And I also don't understand whether the town manager was actually authorized to create a position that created this community service officer, I would have to look into that and really understand whether that was an authority that was granted to the town manager, or if it was something that needed a select board vote.
Thank you, Pam. Aaron,
So I think my understanding of the specific situation is quite different from what Demo described. My understanding is that the select board and or town manager authorized a new title so that Officer Root, I believe, could be hired as a community service officer. That was not a fifth position in the fire department and the police department. It was simply a different title for a fourth person who could not, maybe due to his training, I don't know the details, be hired as a line officer. There was never an authorization going back some years for a fifth officer, whatever their title was. And we've had typically 4 and maybe plus or minus some part-time here and there. And that is what the current board understood and chose to rebuild the department to. And that is what we funded in the 24 budget, was a full staffing of the recent historical 4 officers. That's a police chief and 3 more positions. Whether one of those is a community service officer is up to the discretion of the chief. And I personally fully support the concept of a community service officer. As a firefighter for something like 15 years, I recognize the absolute importance of a diverse set of skills in the fire department, in the police department. And but that's a separate question from whether or not we would have a 5th officer, for which there is not funding in the 24 budget.
thank you, Aaron. Priscilla?
It's my impression that Chief Cochran wants to have 4 officers plus, would like to have 4 officers plus a community service officer, excuse my voice. Personally, after what I've been through, I think what Chief Cochran wants, he should get. But I am one person, and that's why I feel it's important for the town to be able to decide that. And there is at least one question on the warrant articles, and you can say you want additional police or you do not want additional police. And if you want additional police, it's going to cost you more money. You got to decide yourselves.
Thank you, Priscilla. Marcia?
So by statute, basically the select board puts together a budget. That budget then is used by the town manager, who has the hiring and firing authority for the police department. And so the determination of how the money that's preserved for the police department is spent is going to be up to the police chief, up to the town manager, and he'll be consulting with the police chief, of course. So basically, I'm in favor of doing what is needed. And if the police chief, who's the expert that we hired, says we need something, then I think we look at how much money there is. And then it's kind of up to the town manager to work that out. So I think we need to look at data. We need to look at the money that we have, and we make a good decision, and hopefully the town manager will do that. Now, having said that, at the moment, we have an interim town manager who doesn't have the hiring and firing authority that a town manager that we hire on just outright is going to have. And that means that we, the select board, would be approving anything, but the basic structure does not change. If the money is there and the police chief wants something and he works it out with the town manager, then that's what happens.
Thank you, Marcia. Rob?
So my recollection is pretty much the same as Aaron's, which is that historically we've had 3 full-time officers and a police chief. And as far back as 2014, that's been the case. We've had occasional part-time people who have filled in as needed. The community policing title was a title that was given to an officer. An officer then has those responsibilities to try and figure out how to fill that, fulfill those the needs of that position. But it wasn't an extra person. It was always the same number, just one person given that responsibility. It's up to the, as far as who fills that responsibility, I feel it's up to the chief, Chief Cochran, to make those decisions, whether he wants to call somebody, a community policing officer, and give them the responsibilities to in full-time or part-time or not. That's his prerogative, but the money is not in the budget and hasn't been in the budget for years.
Thank you, Rob. Question from the audience. Yes, Charlotte, and then over here, Judge.
I think everybody who has spoken is accurate to some degree. However, I would like to say what I remember about the last study that was done for policing, which showed that people wish to have coverage for town for 20 hours every day. And 3 chiefs now have said, we cannot accomplish that without a 4th officer. Doug Robinson made it possible for a time because he hired 2 part-time officers, and he made it feasible because he did not have to pay them healthcare and other benefits. When he didn't have those people, he himself worked double time to cover the hours at night that were not covered by the 3 officers he had. Last year, for some reason, the select board asked us to spend $50,000 to figure out what we wanted for policing. I don't know why. Because this year, after that was voted down, some of us said, many of us said, we would like to have something and we would like to have a vote in town about it. And those same select board members voted the voting down. They said, we don't want to hear from the town. We know what we should have. We know we need only 3 officers. So you are correct. It's been 3 officers, but I think we should listen to Chief Cochran, as Marcia says. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. I'm going to phrase the question as, are you willing to consider adding the necessary police to effect a 20/7 accommodation to cover the town? In this order: Marcia, Rob, Pam, Aaron, and Priscilla. Marcia.
Yes.
Rob.
If the voters approve of the article, I would consider it.
All right. Pam.
Well, if the voters approved that article, there was no funding mechanism put in the article, and there wasn't a second article added for a funding mechanism. So if the voters approve that 5th position, then the select board is going to have to figure out how to fund it or just ignore the vote.
Aaron.
So, right in the middle. So I'm certainly open to anything, to considering any question. I would be open to considering the question of variously a 5th officer or figuring out a way to get 27 coverage, as not exactly the same. I think I would try and urge the town manager and the chief to, if that was what they felt they needed, to try to make that happen within the budget that we have already approved, that you will be voting on, or that we might approve. I am very, very, very cautious about using one-time temporary funding for an ongoing permanent commitment. And so when people say ARPA for a new position in the police department, or people say unanticipated funds for a new position in the police department, that is going to be a hard sell with me, because what about next year? So that is where I'm at with additional positions in general.
Thank you, Aaron. Priscilla.
Yes, I'm in favor of the coverage of whatever we need. And our police officers deserve a decent life-work balance, which we have not been giving them for a long time. As I've said, I'm one person. The voters should decide if they want to do this and if they want to fund it. But what happened to the money that we had budgeted for people that we did not have in the police department this past year? We also, what happened to the money we budgeted and didn't spend on people who weren't there in DPW? There are things to work out. I would also like to propose that we go back to something we did way back when I moved to town, which was the budget was broken down into some more discrete pieces. And so you could vote, say, in favor of the police department or not. But that's a topic that would require a lot of discussion.
Thank you very much, Priscilla. Now, I want to say judge, but she criticizes me when I say that. Arlene?
So I have a problem. As somebody who once set up the rules for these candidates forum, nobody should ask two questions. My problem is somebody asked me to ask a question for them, but I also have my own question and I don't know which one to do. So I'll take the liberty.
Yes.
Oh, I'm Arlene Rotman. Okay, sorry.
Go ahead.
So I think I'll start with my own question, which is for everyone. And my own question is there something inherent in our select board or in our town that we've had so many town managers over the last decade and none have lasted for 5 years? Either their contracts weren't renewed, they resigned, or whatever the case was, but we don't seem to have the ability to create an effective town manager select board liaison. So that's for everybody.
All right. Thank you, Arlene. You have the question in this order, please. Aaron, Priscilla, Marcia, Rob, and Pam. Aaron?
So I've only been on the select board for 6 months, and I wouldn't say that I was an avid select board junkie before that. So it's a little difficult for me to really speak to each and every one of those town managers. My sense from my time involved with the town government is that the town, broadly speaking, hasn't fully committed to the town manager form of government and it's taken us 20 years. I believe we're getting close, but I think there's been pockets of resistance of various kinds and ways that has been articulated or affected, and that has made it rocky. And we've had town managers who didn't last that long because they were firm and clear about what they wanted to do and what their responsibilities were. And we've had town managers who sat back a little more and tried to be a little more under the radar. But none of them, I believe, came in with full commitment of the entire town, and that is reflected, I'm sure, in the boards at the time, and it's reflected in other elected officials, and it's, I'm sure, reflected in their interactions with residents. So I think we've had some excellent town managers, and I think we've had some more mediocre town managers, but I think that they are not to blame for why we have not been able to keep them for very long.
Thank you, Aaron. Priscilla.
That is a wonderful question, and I'd like to think it's not inherently something about Norwich or the select board. And I look to Hanover, where they had such a wonderful town manager for about 25 years, and I think it's possible. Our experience has been rocky. I wonder, are we going about hiring a town manager in the proper way? A couple years ago, I was on a search committee to find a new pastor. And one of the first things that we had to do was write a profile of who we were as a community. I don't know if our town has ever, I mean, I don't know what the process has been to hire the previous town managers. I wasn't involved in it. But to get a sense that we can communicate to applicants who we are, so they understand a little bit of our history, our expectations, our desires, and, go from there. And it isn't just hiring a headhunting firm. I mean, we need to do more than that, but I think it's possible. I don't think that the town would be totally resistant to a town manager.
Thank you, Priscilla. Marcia?
I think basically we need to do a better job of looking at the skill sets and backgrounds of people when we hire them. We need to do a better job of looking through our personnel policies and making sure that people understand their roles, as I said before. I think the select board needs a better understanding of its role. You don't just hire a person and say, we'll see you later. We need to be monitoring what's going on and directing where direction needs to happen so that we can stop train wrecks happening in advance. So I don't think that there's anything inherently wrong, except that we need to be better managers ourselves as a select board. And I think that will set the tone for everything else.
Thank you, Marcia. Rob?
So when I came on the board, Herb Durfee was town manager, and there was, at that time, there was some question as to whether or not he was up to the job. I encouraged people to give him another chance and see what goes on. I don't mean this to be about Herb in particular, but the communication was there with the town manager to help them fulfill the position as well as possible. When Rod Francis was brought on, there was immediate pushback, and he, I'm sure, would have felt that there wasn't support for him right off the bat. And the town discovered that they could skirt the responsibility of the select board at finding and holding a town manager by making their position untenable. What that means is we lost people all over our management that said, I can't work under these conditions. What we need to do as a select board, as we look for another town manager and a finance director and a planning person, is give them the support they need to get their job done, not to interfere with them in taking the responsibilities on. And we have to be definitely willing to wait for the right candidates to come along.
Thank you. Pam?
I think a lot of the problems that we've seen in Norwich have come from the qualifications of the people that have been hired. I think we need to do a better job of vetting these people, looking at their qualifications, whether their resume reflects their true experience and their education. And one question I have is, do we even have a job description for the town manager? Does the town manager really understand what is expected of them. I know there's statute that says what a town manager does, but statute is not a job description. So I think that's something that I would want to see in the process of looking for a new town manager is, do we have a job description? Does the person coming in understand their responsibilities? Do they have any management experience? Do they have any, do they have the education and training to be a town manager? Those are important questions to be asked before we select the next town manager for Norwich. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. I have two points of order, actually. One is to remind our participants who are on Zoom that if you would like to ask a question, to please raise your hand and Anna will pass that question through. That's number one. Number two is I have a question that has been presented ahead of time from Amy Stringer, and so I'm going to take this opportunity to ask that question. From Amy, what do you feel is the appropriate participation of townspeople in the issues that come before the select board? Repeating, what do you feel is the appropriate participation of townspeople in the issues that come before the select board? In this order, please. Rob, Pam, Aaron, Priscilla, and Marcia. Rob.
So it's important, attendance at the meetings is basically where we can get the feedback on the board from the town about their concerns. It's important to make that known. It's also what it ends up being, though, is that when presented with issues, it's the board's responsibility to take up those issues and to involve the public if it looks like something that's an important policy for the entire town. But the board has the ultimate responsibility of listening to the concerns and figuring out the best way to assist the public. It doesn't mean that any individual who has a bone to pick represents the town as a whole. We have to determine how widespread these issues are. Frequently, they're really quite apparent and we can work with them. But listening is the key point initially, is speak up at meetings, make your points known, and follow up to make sure that something is being done to address them.
Thank you, Rob. Pam?
At a recent select board meeting, one of the select board members made the comment about getting petitions in from the townspeople to get an article on the warrant, that the town would be better served if we didn't hear from residents. So I think it's very important that we, as select board members, have to be very good listeners. We have to take the temperature of the town. We have to know what's important. What are people clamoring for? And what are they clamoring against? And some select board chairs have not been as open about listening to the people when they've raised their hand to be recognized during select board meetings. That's changed as of October with the change of the chair. And I feel that the meetings now are much more civil, they're more collaborative, they're more inclusive. And I hope that that's the way things will continue after the town vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. Aaron? I'm sorry, Pam. I knew that.
So first and foremost, people vote, and they vote for representatives, and representatives are not, somehow blank carriers of people's opinions. Representatives are, the whole point of a representative system is that a representative does the work as themselves. Of course, they're trying to reflect the wishes of the people who elected them, but they're also need to reflect the wishes of the people who didn't elect them. And they need to do what's sensible and what's right. And so it's not as simple as if you elected someone, then they should do what you wanted them to do. Next, of course, people should come to meetings, and I like having people come to meetings, and I like hearing what they have to say. It's better in person. Zoom was more challenging. But thirdly, and I think this is sadly neglected in our society, please join committees, run for office, get involved in a really direct way, because that's the most effective way of all. And we seem to, we have a seat here that's only being run by one person. Why is that? We should have multiple people for every seat. That way we can actually reflect something about the diversity of the town in these elections. We scramble. It's hard to find people to run for some positions and committees. So get involved.
Thank you, Aaron. Priscilla.
I'd like to pick up on a couple of things Aaron was talking about. He talks about how you vote for a representative, and yeah, you do, but you need to keep listening. Just because you were elected doesn't mean you get to stop listening. With the change in leadership of the select board, we are seeing a much more welcoming approach to public comment. In fact, it's been restructured so that the public comment occurs during the issues. So you don't just have a bunch of public comments. Thank you for your comment. Well, we'll get you guys out of the way. Now we, the select board, solely get to discuss the issue. No, now the public is invited to discuss the issue along with the select board, and that's good. Yes, people should come to meetings. Let's make it easy and make sure every meeting is hybrid. So if you can't get out of your house in the evening, it's not convenient or whatever, you can still participate in the meeting. And yeah, just listen and make people welcome. And there's been a better trend. It's been good.
Thank you. Marcia?
I think public participation is critical. We as individuals on the select board we should park our own feelings at the door, and we should be listening to other people, because it's unhealthy, I think, for a group of people to just be a vacuum. Every issue that I have heard about, I don't know all the answers, and my fellow select board members don't. And the people who are affected by issues, who live in the town, should have an opportunity to make those concerns known. So I have to give credit to John Carroll, who suggested the new approach for how we do participation, but I think it's been helpful. And I think we're a richer board for having that, so I'm all for continuing it. So without it, we will not serve people if we don't listen. And I think we have to continue structuring our meetings so that there's time for people. And that's a hard thing, because obviously time is of the essence. And we've had some meetings that went way beyond 11 o'clock. So, but I thought it was necessary so that people began to feel that there was transparency and they were being heard. And I hope that continues.
Thank you, Marcia. Stuart? And I'd ask again, if you'd please identify yourself so that people will know.
Stu Richards, lived in town for about 40 years. Lived in Vermont for about 55 years. And I'd like to talk about the elephant in the room, but I'm going to leave that for a second bite if I get that. I'll leave it up to you as to what the elephant really is. Anyway, what I'd like to talk about is the open meeting law. We, as a town, have spent $56,000 6 months ago. It's probably around $75,000 now with regard to the lawsuit that Chris Kentucky filed against the town to keep things, depending on your point of view. But his prediction was that the town would end up spending about $100,000. So my question, I guess, is to the select board is, do you support the suit? Do you support spending this amount of money? Do you think it's a worthwhile endeavor to spend 100 grand, if that's what it turns out to be, to maintain the town's posture with regard to the open meeting law? Keep in mind that the open meeting law is pretty easy to follow. All you need to do is schedule a meeting, make it open to the public, have an agenda which allows the public to participate, and to issue minutes. Apparently, the town is defending a position that doesn't allow that, at least according to Chris Kentucky. So my question to the board is, again, do you support spending this amount of money? And why is the town so adamant about not conforming to what should be pretty easy? Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. As moderator, I am anxious that you're asking members who are either currently or could become members of the select board to comment on litigation in which they are involved. So understanding that they may not be comfortable doing that, possibly the response to the question could be general opinion towards complying with open meeting rules rather than the specific lawsuit, which may be an issue for them to comment. Is that understood? Because I think the question is how are we doing with open meeting? But as far as the specific lawsuit, I think that question may be inappropriate in the context of this meeting. So that's the way I'm going to approach it and ask them to answer in this order. On open meeting, Priscilla, Marcia, Rob, Pam, and Aaron. I don't mean to minimize the importance of the question at all. It's just the context of there being pending litigation.
All I know about this suit is what I read on the listserv. I have not talked to Chris Kentucky, and obviously Select Board can't talk about it themselves because it is pending litigation. I'm thinking if the town is spending this kind of money, I can't imagine what poor Chris Kentucky, whom I've never met, is spending himself on this. Certainly since the leadership changed to the Select Board, they're very careful about going into executive session, if that helps. No, I don't want us to be spending this money. I don't know. Can we settle the suit? I don't know. I'm not allowed to know anything about it. I think it's just sad.
Marcia?
I personally support the open meeting law. I do everything I can in meetings to make sure that.
Can you hear her?
Can you hear me? Oh, I personally support the open meeting law. I try to make sure that we are complying with it. And I certainly support everyone's right to bring suit if they think that there's a need for the suit.
Rob?
One of my first recollections about meetings at the Select Board was the concern expressed to make sure that the Select Board and committees were following the open meeting law. It's my feeling that that's important. It's really transparency in government is one of the cornerstones of Vermont statute. And doing our best to meet those requirements is something that I've always supported and don't recall having violated in my 3 years on the board.
Thank you. Pam?
I do support following the open meeting law. As a lister, I have taken the role of doing the agendas and the minutes. So I'm very familiar with how the open meeting law works. On the topic of money spent to defend the town in any open meeting law violation accusation, I'm a very frugal person and I don't believe in spending money on this topic. I think if we are told that someone thinks we have violated the open meeting law, the best way to handle it is say, there's an accusation, there's an allegation. We don't think we did anything wrong, but to err on the side of caution and say, let's cure it and move on. Let's not spend a lot of money on something that doesn't need to have a huge expense built up to defend something that really is indefensible.
Aaron,
So I find there's something a little bizarre about the question, since the town is being sued and the town is defending itself, and that costs legal fees. But the town is not choosing to be sued. And the suggestion is that you could simply not defend the town against a lawsuit. And that suggestion has been made in ignorance of all the facts. That seems like just a bizarre suggestion to me. Of course, I support the open meeting law. We do everything we can to follow it. We certainly followed it very, very rigorously in the time that I've been on the board. And I have not found any lack of commitment in any part of the town government to the open meeting law.
thank you, Aaron. It is 8:15 and the scheduled meeting is to run to 8:30. The format involves closing statements of 3 minutes each, which will take up the final 15 minutes of the meeting. With that, we opened the meeting in alphabetical order. We're going to be doing closing statements in reverse alphabetical order. So with 3-minute closing statements, Priscilla.
See if I can get it all in this time. When I told Bonnie I was going to run for select board and I needed a petition, she said, which seat? And I'm like, what? Oh, you have to pick a seat. So there's a 3-year, a 2-year, and a 1-year. I'm going for the low risk seat, the 1 year. Okay. What are my qualifications? Everybody else talked about that first. BC, before children, long time ago. I put my husband through graduate school. He's an architect. He put me through business school. I tend to be very quiet about this in Dartmouth country, but I am a Harvard MBA. If it makes anybody feel better, one of my sons went to Tuck. After graduate school, we went out to Chicago because I had this fabulous job with an ad agency. At the time I left, I was running a $20 million account, so I'm not scared of a $5 million town budget. I quit my glorious career because I wanted to raise my children. We came to Norwich in the fall of 1991. My children immediately came directly across the street to this wonderful school. I spent a lot of time volunteering in the schools. I loved it. I became involved with nearly new sales for the women's club. My name was on that sandwich board that would show my name, my phone number on that sandwich board. It'd be there twice a year saying, call Priscilla for pre-consignment. Nobody made ribald comments. One day, Jean Law invited me for lunch with some friends, asked me to take on a program I hadn't known existed called Noon Neighbors. It provided a social time and a fabulous meal once a month for people in town who lived alone. I ran that for 9 years, and then I ended it because I had a great group working with me and nobody else wanted to take over. So sorry about that. Ever since I've come to town, pretty much, I've been going to the fire district meetings. My husband was put on the Prudential Committee shortly after we arrived. So I've been going to about 30 years of Prudential Committee meetings. I'm the only person sitting here who lives in the village and is a member of the Norwich Fire District. A lot of people don't know what that is. It's a municipality within the town. There is some talk of perhaps merging the two. I think it would be helpful to have someone who is familiar with the fire district on the select board. It's also given me a taste for how government works, which is not how private industry works. And I've also been singing in the choir over there for 30 years, and that's where I would be now if I weren't here. Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. Let's see, Pam.
I'd like to thank the Norwich Women's Club for hosting this evening and to Jack for being the moderator. I've been retired for a number of years and I have the time and the commitment to serve my town. I've been doing that for the last 4 years as a lister, 3 years as a trustee of public funds, and 2 years as an assistant treasurer. I did raise my daughter in this town. She went all the way through the public school system. So I know Norwich pretty well. I think I've acquired skills over the course of my career that will be very useful as a member of the select board, and I look forward to using those skills. I believe in being a contributing member to any enterprise that I undertake, and I will always strive to be a good listener and a team player. Last but not least, I would like to thank Marcia Calloway for her leadership as chair of the select board over the last several months. Her calm and civil and inclusive approach has been an integral part of restoring a feeling of trust that many have felt was lacking here in Norwich. I look forward to having the opportunity to work with Marcia in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Aaron.
So I wasn't sure what I wanted to talk about for closing remarks, not having done this sort of thing before. And I don't generally like to talk about myself very much. So I was going to talk about some more political philosophy, but I think I'll mention that more briefly than I was going to, and maybe talk a little more about what are my qualifications. The political philosophy comes down to, I have a strong belief and some experience with a more consensus-based process for meetings and decision-making, rather than a sort of reductionist voting-based system. And I'm not suggesting that that somehow would magically transform anything, but it is my approach. I don't really believe that you've made a decision if, as someone had mentioned earlier, every vote is 4-1. Then there's something that is not getting, there's an opinion, there's a piece that's not getting mentioned, and or getting included, and it's going to continue to be there, and it's going to it's just not going to go away. And that's the sort of thing that does lead to some of the kinds of frustration and rancor, maybe, if you will, that the town has suffered. Is and I, to some degree, I actually really do lay that at the feet of winner take all voting systems. A neighborhood should be able, neighbors should be able to move forward in a more inclusive, complete way. A little bit about my background. So I grew up here. I went to UVM. I spent a number of years in the Bay Area doing homelessness activism. I got a master's degree in conservation biology while I was there. My undergraduate UVM is in physics. I am very much a science thinking kind of person, and I believe very strongly in constructive, consensus-based decision-making and problem solving. I worked, as I said already, for 20 years at the Montshire, a similar size organization to this town. And I did just about, although I primarily worked on exhibits, I also was involved with virtually every aspect of that organization's functioning. And so I really actually do know how a $5 million organization, 20 some employees functions. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Rob.
Back in the early teens of this century, I remember some instances where I felt that I was an angry community member, a firebrand of sorts, and expressed my anger towards the select board. How could the select board be making such stupid decisions when clearly I knew better? And what I've discovered over the years before I decided to start running for the position was that there are more than one side to every issue, that there are multiple sides, more than two sides most of the time. And that because of that, I've always tried to go into circumstances with an open mind and ready to listen to other people's opinions and eventually make up my mind. The responsibility of somebody on the select board is that eventually you have to make up your mind with the information you've received from the community and found out on your own. And over the years, I have decided that I don't have an axe to grind with the community or with the town. It's work that has to be done. It's challenges that have to be met and overcome. And you always have to remind yourself that there's more that should be done, and how can we move forward to do that? And in particular, the thing that concerns me, but not with anywhere near the competence that Aaron has, is the climate and how we're going to change our lifestyles and change our town to not contribute to the death of life as we know it. Life as we know it, being a baby boomer, is pretty much gone already. We have to be able to do something to slow down the effects so that our kids, our grandkids can find a place to survive. So our ski areas can have snow, and our maple sugarers have some sort of a way to check out to guess what their project, what their profits will be in the future. I'm hopeful that I can help the board communicate better with the community and listen as well as act. I hope to be reelected. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Marcia.
Thank you. Being on the select board is hard work, a lot of it. I found that I'm working, I think, almost as much as I worked when I was not retired. But I found it's a rewarding kind of work. And I thought long and hard before I filed again for another number of years. And I think that everything that's going on right now in the world and in town is important. And we need to find some sort of balance, because no single solution to any single problem is enough. We have to be looking at how any solution is going to affect other problems and the interbalance of them. I mean, we need solar power, but do we need to cut down all the trees that are sequestering the carbon to get the solar power? Maybe not. I think, we need to be thinking about what's happening with water in terms of our climate. We've already had one severe flood issue, and I think we'll have more severe flood issues. We've got to be thinking about just the myriad sorts of things that are coming at us, and 5 people can't do that on their own. It's a matter of a community coming together, figuring out its resources and understanding the geography of the place, as well as the issues that are impacting us globally. And I think it's important now that we all keep in mind that we need to get involved. I think it's been terrific over the last year or so, seeing people actually get interested. When I started paying attention to what was going on in town, I'd go to meetings and there wouldn't be that many people there. And I think this is great. So I would encourage people to get more involved. And I'm going to, if I'm still on the board, I'm going to be trying to find ways to be more inclusive so that people in town can have more of a say, and to keep better control and sort of monitoring what the different committees are doing so that we're working as a uniform, coherent whole as a community. And I think that will serve us all better. So thank you very much for coming, and I've enjoyed working for you so far.
Thank you, Marcia. I would also like to thank those people who have participated by Zoom, those people who have participated by being here this evening, and those that asked questions, thank you. I'd also like to point out that Junction Arts and Media is the organization that's providing the TV coverage. I'd also like to thank the Women's Club and Anna Adachi-Mejia for, I'm sorry, Anna, for doing the Zoom, and Annette Brown for being the person at the Women's Club who has put it all together. Thank you very much. And remember, Monday evening, March 6th is the informational town meeting, and vote on Tuesday, March 7th. Thanks for being here, everybody. Oh, that's okay. Thanks. I got 3 at home. Mine ran out. Aaron, when were you at UVM?